as soon as he said it, it was like halfway through the interview, I think. But I was like, that's the sign-off right there.
Burney on Trickstar Radio.
Grail Hunters. This is a YouTube series I'm dropping from Sunday onwards, episode 1, monthly installments, following the UK vintage market, having a little delve. It's something I'm very interested in, and I know it's extremely popular at the moment, seems to be growing massively. So for episode 1, I went down to Passfield and Grayshott to meet Jack and his team there, have a look through their warehouse, and had a sit down and chat with Jack just to find out his story, how he got to where he is today, his views on the vintage market, what he looks for when sourcing clothes, what he loves about being a seller, and just the general stories that come from running a vintage shop. It's a very interesting insight. We're going to be getting locked into it now. So this is Grail Hunters, the official preview on the 10 till 12 show from radio to YouTube. This is how it's sounding. This is Grail Hunters, where we explore some of the UK's best vintage shops to find some rare pieces and meet the people selling them.
My name's Jack Grover. I run Simply Vintage Clothing.
I took my friends Lucas and Jackson with me to meet Jack, the owner of Simply Vintage, at their warehouse in Passfield. Whilst the boys had a browse through the rails, I sat down with Jack to find out where this all began.
When I was about 14, 15, I used to, like people do now, go into charity shops, pick up pieces for cheap, sell it on. Then it progressed to having a small section in my mum and dad's garage, then into a pop-up shop in Guildford, then to a small studio, big studio, new shop which I've got now, and now the warehouse. The reason I kind of mainly started is because you never know what you're going to find. I walked into a charity shop once and there was like this ridiculous Burberry jacket in there, and then there's like a Burberry net and like a Aquascutum jacket, and I thought, it feels like someone's put this in there just to see my reaction. Like it feels like a prank show or something.
Yeah.
I used to have dreams of me finding things, going to charity shops, going to car boots, and then I'd wake up and be like, oh, what? It wasn't real. It's so nice to see people's reaction when they see a vintage piece for the first time.
There's enough stock at the warehouse to have you searching for hours, and no two pieces are the same. I asked Jack what exactly he was selling and how he finds it.
You can get the most random things in the world, but they do still sell because you can never find them anywhere else. And that's ranging from early 19th century Victorian Edwardian jackets to funny 2000s beer, humour t-shirts. The one day I was at the rag yard picking, I was just getting into the hype of vintage band t-shirts, and when it gets clumped up on the conveyor belt, you kind of just scoop a load off because you never know what's in there. You don't want to just miss it, so you just scoop it off. Usually it's just like generic tourist t-shirts, sometimes nice fade, single stitch, whatever. I picked up a In Utero Nirvana t-shirt, which is worth stupid money. We sell women's wear, men's wear, designer wear. I'd like to think we have a big broad of mix, and if you come into my shop, it'd be pretty difficult to not buy something.
Pretty difficult to not buy something. I couldn't agree more, honestly. There is something for everybody in this warehouse. You'll see it in the video when it drops on Sunday, but the warehouse is in Passfield on an industrial estate, and Jack has spent years absolutely packing this thing to the brim with ridiculous clothing. Like, something I think really makes Simply Vintage stand out compared to other vintage shops that I've been in is that everything is like curated. Even though it's an absolutely enormous warehouse and there's so much stock in there, Jack and his team have gone out and like hand-picked this stock. Like, it really is just kind of puts it above other vintage shops. I know from interviewing suppliers, kind of Aside Vintage, for example, is an episode I'm going to be featuring later in the series of Grail Hunters. A lot of shops will just kind of buy in bulk and like hope for the best and sell items of clothing that like you could maybe go and pick at a kilo sale, for instance. But they get it in such big bulk that they kind of have to sell it en masse, and I'm not 100% sure if that makes for the best market, whereas Jack will go and carefully select these items of clothing, so you know that every time you're going to be going into the warehouse, these things will bang. Like, there's something about it, each item of clothing, that Jack has thought, yeah, that stands out to me. What I also loved as well, the friendly environment. Obviously, we rocked up, the three of us, me, Jackson, and Lucas. We've all got fairly different tastes. A lot of our clothing styles do kind of cross over a bit, but there's also a lot of variance in what we like, and we were still locked in for absolutely hours. They've got the archive as well, with one of the craziest football collections I've ever seen. and it just makes for such a pleasant day out. If you're interested in secondhand clothes, vintage clothes like I am, you couldn't ask for a better place. And I think what makes Jack such a good and successful person is that he really A, cares about this stuff, and B, understands what makes clothes popular. You know, I think he's been running since 2013, 14. Still a young guy as well, younger than I am, but he's spent his time kind of honing in his knowledge and making sure that he's got his ear to the ground, eye to the ground. I don't know what you call it when it comes to what looks good. I would assume eye to the ground. But yeah, he makes sure that he's on top of things, and he really knows what he's talking about. So the later section, or the next section of this interview, was me asking Jack what to him kind of differentiated some of the more modern, contemporary vintage clothing or what made it different from the true vintage, because he specializes in both. And true vintage, I think, actually is his preferred market, which is like stuff literally going back to the Edwardian times. Like when we were in there, he had this dress that looked like something out of like a Halloween horror film from like the 1950s, but the dress itself was even older. It's crazy. But then the more modern stock as well, still the absolute freshest. And like I say, me, Lucas and Jackson had a field day in there. Also, shout out Jackson for the production on the beat as well. We're getting locked into it now. This is Grail Hunters, the second part of my interview with Jack.
I would say, in my opinion, I think true vintage is probably mid-80s. Early 80s and anything lower, 70s, 60s, 50s, is vintage. And anything after that is kind of retro contemporary. Although I still sell it, and I still think there's some amazing pieces from the early 2000s and 90s, I don't think they are really vintage. You can still get some amazing things from 2009, don't get me wrong, but that's why I kind of mix in everything. A big thing which has happened recently is work jackets. You see a lot of new work jackets, even like the old French battered ones. A lot of new companies are remaking these. Soon people will merge into something else and something else. And I just think that I've kind of covered the whole century, so I should have everything.
What started as a one-man operation has now expanded to a team working throughout the week, sourcing clothes from Jack's most trusted suppliers. I was curious to hear what a standard week at Simply looked like.
Mondays, I go to the rag yard, buy in. I leave my house at 6, don't get home till 6. Tuesdays, I'm sorting. Sam's at the warehouse, Lauren's buying and Dom's buying. Wednesday, Lauren and Dom are buying. I'm at the warehouse, Sam's at the shop. Thursdays, me and Dom are buying. Fridays, it's just a bit hectic, to be honest. I mean, we're buying pretty much every day of the week. Yeah. So there's so much new stuff coming in. At the moment, I'm just trying to push everything. When I go by, and I'd say I average about 80 kilos. A good time's about 120, and a bad time's probably 50, 80. So I reckon I go twice a week, 160. I reckon there's about 350 kilos a week of stock. Crazy. Which is mental to think about that.
When you're out basically getting your supply, what do you think gives an item value?
I'd say how well made it is. If you look at old things like the 60s suit compared to even an 80s suit, you can feel the fabric, how much heavier it is, and that is so well made. Even like, for example, buildings now, with the storm the other day, these buildings are not falling down. The new buildings which have just been made, they're ripping apart. It's the same with clothes. That's why people wear vintage clothing, is because it's so well made compared to the things now. Even 100 years on, you can still wear a pair of Converse shoes or whatever.
He's not wrong. He's not wrong. There is something about vintage clothing. It just seems to feel like it's been made better. I feel like in the world we live in with fast fashion, fast industries in general, people are trying to make things as cheaply as possible, and you just don't get the quality. And some of the design, I mean, I've noticed a lot kind of with modern designs of clothes, they seem to be emulating vintage clothing, like, you know, the front print and the back print, double print graphic t-shirts are definitely coming back into fashion, or coming back into trend, whatever you want to call it. So there's definitely a lot that can be learned in terms of quality and in terms of design by looking at the older items of clothing, the vintage side of things. And I think Jack has a really good understanding of that. And also he's passionate, like, which I love to hear. This is someone that's been doing it a long time, and he does it because he loves being able to provide that service for people and enjoys kind of sharing those moments of him finding an item of clothing and thinking, oh, someone's going to love this, and then someone coming into the warehouse, finding that item and, of course, loving it. It's beautiful. We're going to take a quick musical break now. This is one off Will Joseph Cook's new album, which I absolutely love. This is called Easy Undone.
Jack's synergy with his team means they're able to constantly renew their supply with hand-picked items from various eras and of different styles. I asked Jack what he looks for when sourcing and what he thought had made him successful.
I'd like to think that I've got a decent eye and I can see what people want. I kind of look for anything, to be honest. I would look at, obviously, the Nikes, Adidas, Tommy, Ralph, Lacoste, Fila. All the sportswear brands always sell. And the true vintage pieces, when I'm looking for them, I feel like I could almost look with my eyes closed, because you can feel when something's old, because you can feel the wool or you can feel the cotton, and you can feel it's heavier, it's chunkier. Again, it's just made better. A lot of people wear gloves, and you can't wear gloves because you've got to be able to feel the fabrics. It's grim that you don't wear gloves, but you can't. So I used to love people coming to the warehouse, and I'd know when they walked in exactly what would suit them, and they would go, oh, thanks for finding me that. Or I used to kind of look at styles, and I'd be able to tell what people would wear and what would they look good in. If I find a certain jacket or a certain shirt, I'll kind of keep it for someone, and then I have that when they come in next, they have like a nice collection of stuff I think they'd suit, and I probably have about 2 or 3 clients a week like that, I'd say. For example, there's a customer, sometimes I'll keep like Rip Curl and Quicksilver and 90s surf stuff for the one customer, then he'll come in, and it kind of works where in this business you kind of help each other out, and then eventually they kind of sort you out.
As well as Jack's customer base in the UK, Simply Vintage now sells to overseas clients.
With my True Vintage, I've got a lot of international customers. I've got quite a big Japan base. Not just me, but they love True Vintage. You get around 2 or 3 or 4 a month. Not that regular, but they're big spenders and they love British stuff. So anything British workwear, Barbers, Smocks, Burberry's, Aquascutum, these kind of real true British brands, they would love. With the 90s stuff, I used to sell on ASOS Marketplace, and you'd sell so many things to like Denmark and Sweden and Switzerland. And then obviously I've got the customer base which is near me, which is my local, almost like my local friends and their friends, and I like to keep that kind of nice and close-knit. I like to think that I'm cheap enough to I'm kind of still sorting them out, rather than them going online and finding the same sweatshirt for 45, they can come in my shop and buy it for 20.
Yeah, so he's not wrong. Like I said a million times before, he's not wrong. I said it once, maybe not a million times, but Jack's level of care really is out of this world, and I think that is such a key part in his success. Like, you can't grow as a business, especially in that industry, unless you have like a high level of care and also a good level of customer service, and I think that is what makes Jack stand out above the rest. And obviously he has the team around him. I met Sam and I met Lauren, who I'm going to be introducing shortly, interviewed them as well, just to kind of get an idea of what it's like running the Grayshott shop, which is again based in Hampshire/Surrey kind of area, very near where my parents are from actually, hence why I was aware of Simply Vintage from a long time ago, back when they had the pop-up shop in Guildford. And you can really see the graft that Jack has put in and that his team support him with. Like, when I was there was Lauren and Dom out at one of the rag yards that they get a lot of their regular stock from. They had a FaceTime call kind of mid-interview, which you'll be able to see in the full-length video, where Jack was kind of going through the bits they'd picked out and saying, which ones were up to standard, which ones were kind of good value for the money that Jack and the team would have to spend in order to bring them in. And I think that just kind of puts into perspective the hard work that goes into running a successful vintage clothing business, but also what it takes to kind of be able to provide that upper echelon of vintage clothing. As I say, in the full-length video, you'll be able to see all the ins and outs, and I am dropping the video this Sunday on my YouTube channel. If you want to head over to the YouTube channel, it's Burney X The 10 Till 12 Show is the name of it. If you want to find an easy link to it, come and follow my Instagram. That's Burney, BURNEY_official. My little link tree in the bio will be able to take you to my YouTube page, where you can find all my previous interviews from my recent shows with Saina, with Jarky Mono, with, of course, Lucas Ramsell, who's going to be joining me in a couple of weeks' time for the birthday show. Your boy's turning 27, who would believe it? And yeah, that's where all my content is going to be in the future, and also where the full episode of Grail Hunters will be landing. If you're liking the interview so far, please do go and watch the video, because it will give you a visual concept, a visual idea basically of how comprehensive the stock is at Simply Vintage. You'll be able to see Jack's charming face as well, listening to him talking about his business. So make sure you don't miss it. It's going to be dropping, I haven't got an exact time yet, but Sunday evening I expect, and you can find out the exciting story of Simply Vintage so far and what they're going to be getting into in the future. Something they've recently managed to breach into is the vintage market in London. They've got a pop-up shop in Portobello Road, which is Jack is hoping to become a permanent fixture. So let's get into him talking about that right now, and then we're going to introduce Lauren and Sam as well.
At the moment, we've got a pop-up shop in Portobello. I think now I've realised the potential of how much True Vintage does up in London. It's silly me not following the money and going up there and getting a good shop there. Although it's stupid money, it usually comes back. I have some Burberry Macs in my shop, and I sell them for like 100 quid. 80 quid I'd probably take. And Lauren was like, oh, let's price them up when we put them in Portobello. She put 320 quid on them. We sold 2 of them. I was like, you're joking me. I said to her, can you do a bit cheaper? Because I think that's embarrassing. She said, no, just leave it. We sold 2 of them.
There are some incredible pieces to see at the warehouse, both in the archive and available to buy. Before we left, we headed over to the Grayshott shop to meet Sam, find out what goes on there and what's on the rails for the customers that come in.
I'm Sam. I work at Simply Vintage. On paper, my title is warehouse manager, but I tend to be a bit here and there and everywhere. So I'm here in the shop today, basically looking after the place at the moment. Standard day in the shop, you get people coming in fairly early. Effectively, it's just people browsing usually. A lot of people do tend to buy things, but you get more people that like to just have a look around the place, because there's so much stuff around here. You know, even not the clothes, like there's a lot to look at. So I think it, tends to draw people in. The displays that we have over here. We have someone who looks after the creative side of things called Lauren, and Lauren's really good at making things look presentable and drawing people in. So effectively she's on that sort of side of things, and the displays are really what brings people in if they haven't been here before, or if they haven't been to Grayshott at least anyway.
How much stock do you reckon you see come in and out of this shop in a week?
We try to change stock, I think, at least twice a week in the shop. And I'll tell you what, there's always new stuff coming in. We never tend to have like the same sort of thing come in twice. Obviously you do get some duplicate kind of things here and there, but generally, like, you see something and you think, that's crazy, I've never seen anything like that before. And it's a great experience when you do get that kind of moment,
The shop stands out boldly in the quiet town of Grayshott and is just as unique as the clothes are. I asked Sam what kind of customers come in to check out the array of pieces available at the store.
Oh, we get a total variety over here. You could literally get someone coming in who's, just come straight from school around the corner. There's loads of schools around here anyway, so some people just come straight after that. You can get elderly people, you can get anywhere in between, to be honest. It's probably one of the benefits of working in a shop like this, is that you get to see and meet so many different people, and that's such a great thing. I don't think you get that in many other places, to be honest. Even if it is just some of the locals, like, it's nice because when they come back in, you know firstly exactly what they're looking for, and you also just have a better sort of bond with them, and it's nice to just chat to people, I think.
The Grayshott shop is an amazing space and is home to a bubbling community of vintage enthusiasts. I asked Sam why people should visit if they've not been before.
If you haven't shopped at Simply before, you should definitely come here due to the variety of products that we have and the range in which we provide. I don't think you get that at a lot of the vintage places. It tends to be more 90s to 2000s stuff, whereas you can find something for everyone here, I think. So that's probably the main stickler, I would say. Grayshott may not be the biggest, most exciting area, but this is probably the place you'd come to Grayshott for.
We had a great time meeting Sam at the shop and settled up for the purchases we'd made that day. I went back to Grayshott a couple of weeks later, and to my surprise, the shop had been completely transformed. I met Lauren and spoke to her about what it's like being the mastermind behind all of this.
I'm Lauren. I've been working for Simply Vintage for 2 years. I kind of cover all the creative side, the Instagram, the shop, and everything else. I think it starts with the window, good outfits on the mannequins. I like everything to be in colour, good displays, just a nice shopping experience for everyone that comes in.
Having a strong image both online and in store is a vital part of the business. I asked Lauren how she achieves this.
I aim to post a few times a week, so it starts with planning that and seeing what we get in the good bits, the best bits that we want to preview. I'm a bit fussy, so I take quite a lot of time over Instagram. For this shop, we kind of restock it once a week, so that just involves me going through the new stuff, taking out what's best for the shop, and tagging it up, steaming it, washing what needs to be washed. and just make it look good.
What kind of stock do you see come through here?
For our customers in Grayshott, we get through a lot of jumpers, jackets, Levi's. But the thing is, we do a bit of everything. I think what makes each piece special is that it's not just the brand, but like the design, and we look for that as well. So I think that's quite special.
I knew it was one of a kind, but I wanted to know why Lauren thought Simply was so unique.
There we go then. So that was Lauren and Sam, who of course help run the Grayshott shop. And if you want to see the full interview, Grail Hunters episode 1 drops on my YouTube this Sunday in the evening at some point. That's all I have for you in terms of exact specific information right now, but I guarantee you do not want to miss this. And if you want to go and check out Simply Vintage Clothing, I really recommend you do. On Instagram, it's just Simply Vintage Clothing, one word. The shop is based in Grayshott in Hampshire, and the warehouse is based in Passfield. I know they're having a big sale event this Saturday where they're going to be inviting people all day for drinks, food, some live DJs, I believe, as well. They had a real turnout. They did this for the first time a couple of months back, and it looked like a really amazing event. I wasn't able to make it, unfortunately, and I'm not going to be able to make it this Saturday either, which I'm gutted about. But if you do want to go and check it out, I really, really recommend you do. Go and find them online. And to wrap things off for the Grail Hunters preview, I'm going to leave you with Jack telling you exactly how you can get in touch with them and pay them a visit.
The shop is open Tuesday to Sunday. Check my Instagram or website for hours. The warehouse, you have to book an appointment via the Instagram or give me a call. We've got 2 accounts on Depop, one selling true vintage, one selling new pieces. We've got eBay, selling contemporary things. We've got Vinted, we've got Etsy, we've got ASOS. So I'd like to think we kind of cover everything. I would say the best way to come here is to book an appointment for the warehouse. The warehouse has got so many pieces. We've got about 10,000 pieces in here. Every single piece has been handpicked by me. So I'd like to think every piece has got something about it which someone should fall in love with. It's actually a bit of business advice to buy vintage because you're never going to lose money on it.
And you're always going to be wearing something different to the people that are just going and buying whatever's in the shops right now.
Yeah,
or what's
don't be a
hot,
sheep.
Don't be a sheep.
Don't be a sheep, dude.
Don't be a sheep, be a shepherd. I couldn't agree more. Like, literally, when Jack said that, I was like, you know what, that is... As soon as he said it, it was like halfway through the interview, I think. But I was like, that's the sign-off right there. Don't be a sheep, be a shepherd. And get yourself down to Simply Vintage Clothing. Like I said, the sale event this Saturday, not to be missed for anyone that's a fan of vintage clothing, or for anyone that's just a bit curious. After hearing that interview, you want to find out a little bit more, I would say the best thing to do is get yourself down to their sale event this Saturday. It's going to be huge. The whole warehouse is going to be open, and it's going to be a right old shindig. And make sure you catch the full episode 1 of Grail Hunters, dropping on my YouTube channel this Sunday.
Burney on Trickstar Radio.